It was one of those warm, lazy Saturdays in Lakeside, a town where everyone knew everyone else. At least, that's what most people believed. The sun was just beginning to peak, casting a golden hue over the quiet streets. In the Alexander household, a bright, cheerful energy filled the air, one that was often brought by the youngest member of the family, a spirited 6-year-old named Tiana Alexander. Tiana was the apple of her father's eye. She had a radiant smile that could light up any room, and her curiosity knew no bounds. That particular morning, she was ecstatic to take her new bike out for a spin. The bike, a shiny red with golden tassels on the handlebars, had been a Christmas gift from her father, and it was her most cherished possession. As Tiana prepared to leave, her father, Captain Malcolm Alexander, reminded her of the importance of safety. "Make sure you wear your helmet, Tiana, and stay close to your brother, okay? I don't want you out of his sight." Tiana nodded enthusiastically, though her mind was already on the adventure ahead. Her older brother, Jalen, a typical 14-year-old more interested in meeting up with his friends than babysitting, brushed off his father's concerns. Yeah, Dad. I'll watch her. Can we go now?" he muttered, eager to be on his way. With a final warning from their father, the siblings dashed out of the house. But in their rush, the helmet was forgotten, and Jalen was already speeding off down the road, leaving Tiana to struggle behind. Unbeknownst to the children, that same morning, Officer Karen White was beginning her patrol. Karen was a recent transfer from the city, known for her strict, no-nonsense approach to policing. Lakeside was a far cry from the bustling urban environment she was used to, and she hadn't exactly endeared herself to the tight-knit community. Her attitude was often met with resentment, but she dismissed the locals' concerns as mere small-town naivety. Karen's patrol that day brought her to a quiet street where she noticed a little girl, Tiana, riding her bike alone, without a helmet. Her sharp eyes immediately locked onto the situation. The sight of the girl riding such an expensive-looking bike, seemingly without supervision, triggered a suspicion in Karen's mind. Karen pulled her cruiser to the side of the road and stepped out, her eyes narrowing as she approached Tiana. "Hey there, sweetheart," she called out, her tone carrying a false sweetness that didn't match the coldness in her eyes. "Is that your bike?" Tiana stopped, her wide eyes filled with both curiosity and apprehension. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, clutching the handlebars tightly. Karen's expression hardened. "Do you know it's against the law to ride without a helmet? And where's your permit? You know you're supposed to carry one." Tiana was taken aback. She had never heard of such a rule. I forgot my helmet," she stammered. "And my daddy has the permit. He said I'm not supposed to carry it." Karen's demeanor shifted from stern to downright hostile. "Watch your tone with me, young lady," she snapped. "Do you think your daddy knows more about the law than I do? Who is he anyway?" Tiana, now frightened and unsure, whispered, "My daddy is the police captain." Karen's eyes narrowed further. She had heard of Captain Alexander, but the idea that this little girl could be his daughter seemed preposterous to her. A black child, riding a bike like that? Something didn't add up in her mind. "Is that so?" she sneered. "Is this bike even yours? It looks stolen to me." Tiana's heart began to race. She had never been in trouble with the police before, and she couldn't understand why this officer was treating her so harshly. "It's not stolen. My daddy got it for me for Christmas," she pleaded, but Karen was having none of it. In her mind, Karen had already decided that Tiana was lying. The little girl was probably from a troubled home, trying to manipulate her with sweet talk. Karen had seen it all before, children who were part of gangs, who started off small with thefts like this before graduating to more serious crimes. She wasn't about to let that happen on her watch. Without another word, Karen grabbed Tiana's small wrist and cuffed her. The metal was cold and heavy against the child's skin, and her eyes filled with tears. She looked around, hoping to see her brother or anyone who could help her, but the street was empty. "You're going to jail," Karen said coolly as she dragged Tiana to the cruiser, "for stealing a bike and lying to an officer." Tiana's pleas for help, her cries that the bike was a gift from her father, fell on deaf ears. Karen was convinced she was doing the right thing, teaching this child a lesson that would stick with her for the rest of her life. She shoved Tiana into the back of the cruiser and slammed the door shut. The ride was long and terrifying for Tiana. Karen deliberately drove through the roughest parts of town, pointing out the vagrants and drug addicts who lingered on the corners. "You see those people?" she asked harshly. "That's where you're headed if you don't straighten up." Tiana, her fear turning into anger, shouted back, "My daddy works at the police station. He's going to be so mad at you." Karen laughed, but it was a hollow, uneasy sound. "Is that what your mommy tells you? That your daddy works at the jailhouse? Nice try, but I'm not buying it." The tension in the car was palpable. Tiana, despite her young age, was beginning to realize that this officer wasn't just being mean. She was dangerous. "My daddy's the police captain," she insisted, her voice trembling but firm. Karen's heart skipped a beat. Captain Alexander was indeed the police captain, and the thought that she had just arrested his daughter sent a wave of panic through her. She pulled the cruiser over to the side of the road, her mind racing. How could she have made such a colossal mistake? Okay, listen," Karen stammered, her voice suddenly unsteady. "We can sort this out. You don't need to tell your dad about this. Okay? This was all just a game." "That's right, a game. You can tell him we were playing a game, and everything will be fine." But Tiana wasn't having any of it. "I'm telling him," she cried. "He'll be looking for me, and he's going to be so mad at you." Karen knew she was running out of time. In a desperate attempt to cover her tracks, she drove to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, hoping to hide Tiana until she could figure out what to do. She dragged the terrified child inside, cuffing her to a cold, metal pipe in a dark corner. "Stay here," Karen ordered. "I'll be back to sort this out." Tiana was left alone in the cold, damp warehouse, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know how long she had been there when she heard the familiar voice of her father calling out her name. "Tiana! Tiana, where are you?" Her heart soared with relief. "Daddy, I'm here," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. Captain Alexander, following the tracker he had placed on Tiana's bike, burst through the door, his heart pounding with fear. He found his daughter, handcuffed and trembling, and immediately pulled her into his arms. "It's okay, baby. I'm here now. You're safe." But as he held his daughter close, his mind raced with questions. Who had done this to his little girl? Why was she handcuffed? His eyes narrowed as he looked around the warehouse, his police instincts kicking in. Whoever had done this was going to pay dearly. As they left the warehouse, Karen appeared, her face as pale as a sheet. "Captain Alexander, I didn't know it was your daughter," she stammered, trying to explain herself. The captain's eyes blazed with fury. "What difference does it make if it's my daughter or someone else's?" he roared. "You're a monster. How dare you abuse your power like that, terrorizing a child?" Karen tried to defend herself, but it was no use. The damage was done. Captain Alexander radioed in for backup, reporting the incident as a kidnapping. Karen was taken into custody, her career in ruins. The news of Karen's actions spread quickly through the town, and soon, the story went national. People were appalled to hear that a police officer had abused her power in such a horrific way. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for the following week, and the town buzzed with anticipation. At the hearing, the evidence was overwhelming. Body cam footage showed the entire encounter, from the initial stop to the terrifying drive through town. Karen's defense was weak, and the panel wasn't convinced. She was dismissed from the police force and faced criminal charges for her actions. Captain Alexander, though relieved that justice had been served, couldn't shake the trauma of the incident. His daughter had been through an ordeal no child should ever experience, and it weighed heavily on his heart. In the months that followed, Tiana slowly recovered from her trauma, but the fear of that day lingered. Captain Alexander took a leave of absence from the force to focus on his family, determined to be there for his daughter as she healed. As for Karen, she was left to face the consequences of her actions. Stripped of her badge and reputation, she was sentenced to prison for her crimes. Her story served as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of justice for all.